Hello, everybody. This is Deborah Vick with Wheels in Motion. This is a new podcast that is sponsored by Victorious, a nonprofit foundation created for the empowerment of people of all abilities. With this podcast, it is our goal to create a platform to highlight and showcase cases in which people have pivoted and through this pivot have found their true purpose. Up next is our first interview with Crystal Fox. She is an amazing podcaster, one who empowers and uplifts so many people in our communities. But for now, we are taking a moment to listen to her story, where she has had some pretty significant challenges, but these challenges have led her down to the path of her true purpose in life. And you will soon learn how she found her way through the use of her microphone. But first, sit back, take a moment, and listen to this journey, as you will soon see her strength has given strength and empowerment to so many others. Thank you. And during the interview when you interviewed me, we started to talk a little bit about your journey and what you've gone through to be here today. And everything in your background was just so empowering. And when I look at you, I see this incredibly beautiful, empowering, engaging woman. And we really wouldn't even think of all of the challenges that you've incurred to be where you are today. Can you tell us a little bit about your story? What's inspired you to be, obviously, a spokesperson and an advocate, but let's take this back a minute and to learn a little bit more about you. And I know this is a little personal, but I think your story is really important for people to hear and understand.
That is so huge to think about where each other came from. So for me, sharing my message, to be honest, when I first even thought about it, I got so nervous. I was cringing. I lived in a lot of shame, which I'll explain why here in a second. But I have to say that if I can have lived in shame and you can have gone through everything that you have been through, and whoever's listening, you know your story. I just encourage you first to step out of that shame. As you were listening to my story, you'll understand. So I really want to take you back. I kind of give a brief synopsis of my childhood because I believe that we all have our childhood story. And for me, it was definitely filled with a lot of addiction from my parents, which, to be honest, I only started sharing last year alone because that was the part that I had shame around, which was how someone else impacted my life. So I grew up without parents. I lost my mom to cirrhosis of the liver when I was 13, and my dad was a full-blown, what I thought was an alcoholic at the time. I was 13. I didn't understand all of the things that was going on, even in my own household. So for me, that carried, and it's my backstory to understanding why having a family was so important, extremely important. Because especially as women, we were groomed to be mothers, to have a family, to do something, that makes us happy and changes what we're doing. But after having my third miscarriage, and this was shortly after leaving my career, which I put all my identity into, and when I was given the ultimatum of choosing between a family or a career, I just knew that I needed to leave. But any job that you want to leave, it just doesn't happen tomorrow. So after leaving, it took about 2 months, and I was suffering from my third miscarriage. So I had, at this point, kind of lost all hope of what a family could be like. I internalized a lot of my pain. I blamed my body. I blamed decisions that I made decades ago, I just kept blaming and shaming myself for where I was. But also, not a lot of people discuss the postpartum that you actually suffer, even though I didn't take home a baby. And that is something that, we discuss loss and we talk about that, but we don't actually talk about the physicality of our body, the pain, the passing, the understanding what's going on and still having to go through it. So at this point, I call it my dark age because it was just, it was dark. It was the darkest. My depression, anxiety really set in. And I was looking for the world to pour back into me because Lord knows I have given so much to everyone. I'm the yes girl. I, never say no. I just keep giving, giving, giving. And at this point, when I am shattered, I am broken, I just wanted someone to come pick up the pieces because I didn't know how. I didn't feel like I could. And I mean, even down to my husband, like I expected him to just take all these feelings and make them disappear. But that's not realistic, especially where I'm sitting now. So for me, losing my job as an identity, feeling like motherhood alone was a loss in itself, and then that missing, that like relationship that I had with my mother was amazing despite my childhood. Like we were close friends. Were there bad days? There was a lot of bad days, but there was a lot of good ones too. But I just wanted that, how can I say, like I thought the love that you would get from a child was something that I was missing. I know now a lot more, but in this moment, I don't. And I just remember even like crying in my closet, just like no one could understand. And then talking about it is so like taboo. Because if you talk about it and you post on social media, well, then you're just begging for attention. But if you aren't sharing, well, then people didn't know. And so it's kind of like this gray area, especially being with Marcus for years. People, it's the topic. When are you having a kid? When are you having children?
I think really has to be highlighted. The loss.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just It's not just a physical loss of losing the baby, or the thought of the family, right? And and I know men don't necessarily feel it the same way as women because of the connection that we immediately have with the growth of a baby inside of us. It's immediate. I mean, as soon as we know, even before we know, I know for me, for you, it's not my story, but I can empathize because that was a fear that I had while I carried both of my boys, and Ethan ended up in a NICU for a week after being born. And fortunately it wasn't severe or anything. But I saw these other babies, right? And I saw these tiny, itty bitty babies,
Yes.
smaller than the size of my hand. And I was extraordinarily fortunate for what I had, but I could empathize because I could see what parents were going through. And to look at you here and knowing that, one, so you made two really good points, right? So often our bodies we are connected to identifying as either a mother or in a job, right? And both.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And
that's like one of the first interview questions that we get from complete strangers and it's, although people are trying to get to know us, and I have said that, I genuinely think people aren't trying to be mean, but I think that we have to be aware of what we're asking because a lot of times we're just asking to put someone on like a tiered level, like a class level of where they're at. And for me, that doesn't work. At all, because again, like think about that made you kind of like retreat, which is what I called, I very much did the same thing, like I just internalized, so I retreated myself back, and I just of course was living smaller. I wasn't living me. I wasn't being mean. I'm a talker, and I just became like an introvert, but not a happy one, not a comfortable one. It was so different. And there is the psychological part, there is the physical part, there's kind of seeing it in your face because we do glamorize that American dream. Like we do glamorize it. We never talk about the bad things because again, if you talk about the quote unquote, I would say maybe not bad, but hard, the struggle, things real life situations, then it's like, oh, you're complaining. And it's like, no, because everyone told me that if I got pregnant, I would glow. And then That wasn't my case scenario. I suffer from PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And that alone with my hormones is already a chaos situation. And so many things that I've had to deal with just from having PCOS that has led to, you know, me not being able to carry to full term.
Right.
And I was even told that I wasn't ever going to be able to get pregnant.
There the whole time. So when you talk about your experience, this is why I want to go back to your thing, is that your experience is real and it's not shared enough. I don't think people understand, one, it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to mourn that loss, right? Because you lost a child, you several, right? And you have angel babies now. And that makes me a little verklempt when I say that, because I really feel for you for that. And I know that had to be very traumatic and a very hard experience, and not one that most people will understand, right? And having been in the queue and seen the babies, it really it resonates with me. And I want to hear more. How did you go from that to where you are now? I mean, you are such a beautiful, strong woman, and I didn't really know these stories until we were talking about it. And hearing it just surprised me, because I see you as so strong and so powerful that it surprised me. It really did, and I think it just is really important to share. So I want to turn it back to you again.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I have to say, I've gotten that most of my life, is that people assume that I was like silver spoon, perfect family, cookie cutter. She's been given everything because of how I dress, or because I love fashion, or how I present myself, or that I'm actually still, I'm strong, but I'm kind at the same time. But, for me, it was a lot of realization. It was a lot of digging to different areas that I never thought would ever see a light of day. There was a lot of figuring out, because of my parents, because of the loss of my parents, not having them, that I was holding on to this. I was expecting a destination to be happy, which I feel like we all get caught up into, right? Once something happens, that's when I'll be happy. And I think for me, I always learned to self help, improvement, all those things. And then also, I have this great sense of humor side. So I love funny stuff, comedic. And that's really what turned me on to podcasting. So I would listen to it, and it would honestly help me get through the day. It would help me not cry at work. It would help me just be able to think about something else for a second that wasn't the loss or the depression, or how I was going to fight, a panic attack or something like that. But it was really coming home and sitting down with Marcus and saying, hey, like, I want to start a podcast. Because to me, when I say that I put my identity to everything, I consider it really losing my voice, losing myself. I didn't know who I was because I attached it to everything out there, and not to the person, who's been with me my whole life, which is me. Like, right? It seems so easy to think about, but then not the case. And the decade before then, not the case. So I started podcasting. I bought this $25 mic off of Amazon. This is him. It's Mike. And I started talking. I started talking about things that I was passionate about: body positivity, how me and Marcus met. I didn't know the direction at that moment, but I knew that my voice needed to be heard for me. And I always say, I feel like in all this darkness, that because of this mic, because I was sharing what I was inspired about, that I got just like this little piece of the world back to myself. And I always go like this, like I always just, because you're always like in a closet at the beginning when you're doing a podcast, but I always just feel like I had this little corner of the world that was just mine again. So that helped me a lot. I started talk therapy because I was willing to do anything, because where I was standing, I wasn't happy. And at that point, there is no anyone pouring into you. And that was one of the hardest lessons, honestly, that I learned. So as I was talking, it honestly became therapy. I started getting more inspired. I wanted to break the stigma of what mental health looked like as someone who's plus size, as someone who's gone through everything and people will think otherwise when they meet me, as a voice for PCOS, as a voice for someone who is human and lives a human experience that is not cookie cutter, that you can't cut out on any platform. Like, I just wanted to talk about those things. And then I started interviewing people, and that was mind blowing. I mean, even interviewing you and sitting there and getting to know more in depth into your story and your advocacy, like, that's huge for me. And I was able to talk to two other people. I mean, I don't think I stopped talking to Marcus about all the things that we were talking about, even though he edits the podcast. I was like, and this, and can you believe this? Because we talked about our struggle in the medical field. I mean,
Right.
if I'm sitting there throwing up, sicker than a dog, well, it's because I need to lose weight. If I want to have a child, well, then it's
Yep.
I need to lose weight. And I was treated terribly when I was going through my miscarriages. Terribly, terribly, by people, by doctors and nurses that were supposed to be there. And they acted as if, I remember it was my second miscarriage. I was sitting there waiting to get the test results because I had found out I was pregnant. And I had, you go through the waiting room, you walk past all the mothers who are pregnant, if not the people who are getting the same answers or test as you.
Right.
And then she was updating my chart. And she starts typing and she's like, okay, your address, checking this, and then she's like, okay, and miscarriage. And that's how I was told that I was losing the baby that was inside of me, was
Really?
her updating my chart. And I don't think
Oh
I
my
ever saw
gosh.
Marcus's head like flip
Right.
around, and he goes, did you just tell us that she's having a miscarriage right now? That's how you're going to tell my wife?
Right.
Like, and then to take it even one further, the doctor comes in and he's like, oh, I take this whole holistic approach, and I'm sure you don't want to start trying again. As I'm losing the child in me, he wants to make up his mind or just not be the doctor that,
Oh my
I deal
gosh.
with. Yes.
Oh.
Yes. And then like my other one, I was in the emergency room
Right.
because of the stuff that was happening. And there was no cover on the bed, no cover over my legs to
Oh my
what was
gosh.
happening. And I literally had to clean myself up and the area. And even you talk about like the psychological part.
Right.
Like, yes, I'm not walking home with a baby, but I'm also being mistreated. I'm looked
Right.
down upon because, well, she's fat, so of course she made the decision. Like, I walked into the room and they didn't even know my chart before they start judging. And
Right.
then all the things after, like, they didn't say, hey, you would suffer from this, like, maybe you need,
Counseling. You need
to
speak
talk
with
to
somebody.
someone. Right. And that was honestly the reason why I started talking, because if I was in that position and I wrote a letter
Right.
to their manager and I just spilled it all. I was like, I can't imagine if I was anyone else, if I would still be standing here.
Right.
Honestly, because just the ridicule was crazy. And that's when I knew I needed to start talking about it, was the medical portion, because I truly believe that we need, especially they knew I was coming in for that appointment. They
Right.
could have had a second area to go into, an area so that I could have gathered myself. Because let's remember, the women who are trying to get pregnant and who are pregnant or in the situation that I was in that same waiting area as I'm walking out,
Right.
mad, crying, upset, all those things, and they're seeing their worst fears in front of their
Yeah.
face. And I just think that we have to make we
Yeah.
have access to building buildings and changing locations, that there's talk therapy with medical, or at
Absolutely.
least offered a different area, so that me and Marcus could be together and grieve for a second.
Right.
Like, there was never a moment where anyone ever said it's okay to feel sad. If anything, I, again, felt shamed if I was, because I didn't understand what was going on with my body. And the third one hit the hardest. I was more into the pregnancy than before. So it was different.
How far in
So
were
now
you?
talking about it, I'm sorry,
How far into the pregnancy?
I was 3 months for that one.
Oh, wow.
So I typically only make it about 6 to 8 weeks because it I have a tilted uterus as well, but it
Okay.
doesn't close. Like, I can't carry to full term. And I've heard it all. There's countless reasons. And then I've seen people, have miracle babies as well. But it's hard to, again, you know how hard it is to find a good doctor, especially
Yeah.
one that listens to stuff
Really
going
hard.
on with your body. Yeah. So it's just so, it's frustrating. Like, even talking right now, I'm a little frustrated because I just think people need to be treated better. Or
Right.
if you're giving me $1,000 bill,
Yeah.
you should give me the knowledge that foots that $1,000 bill on what is going on in my life and what I'm there to be seen for. So, really, to answer your question, I started talking, I started podcasting, and it was healing to connect with people and women that have gone through similar situations. Not everyone's the same.
Right.
To find a childless and child-free space. And that was something that came about on Clubhouse, actually, in Lori's room. And we
Lori,
started
the
doing
magic
childless.
connector.
What'd you say?
Lori, the magic connector.
Yes. Oh my goodness. It was me and Jenna started the room, and I started to find people who were in my boat, per se, and also okay with not having kids.
Right.
Because anytime that you're out, people are going to ask, or the family ask, and you don't realize too the portion of grieving that the people around you even have to do, because their expectation of you having a
Right.
family, whether it's having their grandchild, having their cousin, or whomever, like, they just have this expectation. But at the same time, when you're like, this isn't happening, they're grieving. They're grieving even your loss. People
Right.
do grieve that loss, and it's hard to be there for other people who are going through that while you're going through it, honestly. But those are topics that we discuss, is how to handle meeting a stranger, and they're trying to get to know you,
Right.
and
And
it's
that's
like,
the first
okay,
question is,
we're
do you
out
have
at
kids?
right. We're at a bar drinking, say, or at an event, I'm having a glass of wine, and they're like, hey, when are you having a kid? And it's like, this is not the story that I want to
Right.
talk to right away with a stranger. Now, obviously, I'm talking on a platform, but there's certain things that I want to stay mindset wise. Like, oh, I'm at
Right.
this party doing this and whatnot, but it just changes the mood, because even their face is like, holy crap, I just asked this
Right.
question. And people are not ready. People aren't
Yes.
always ready as well on the other side of asking that question. So if you do ask it,
You need to be
be
ready.
prepared.
Right.
I only will talk to people about their kids when they tell me, like you told me about your kids.
Right.
You're like, hey, I got the boys, and you told me about them, but I wasn't like,
Right.
what
Well,
happened here? What happened here? Tell me everything. But
and
once you give me that, then I can talk with you about it, because you
we
opened
were
up.
together 11 years before we had kids. So, because like we were never expecting, we thought we might adopt one day, but we
Mm-hmm.
also know that adoptions for people with disabilities are not always, don't always happen.
Much of anything.
But, the other thing you point out too is that medical treatment, right? That is so important. And I know we've talked about this before, because I too have had not so great medical treatments in one of the hospitals I stayed in, right? And so when you're talking about having to be cleaning yourself after the loss of your child, that is just mind boggling, horrific. It is a horrific experience that you should never have had to go through. I mean, nobody should have to clean themselves in the hospital in the first place. That is why there are people in the hospital that work there to help us in situations. But to be in that situation where you just lost a baby, and it's not just the baby, right? You are mourning the loss of the life you thought you were going to have, right? And the life you expected to have with this child. And now my dog is back. The life you thought you were supposed to have with this child, and now you're having to clean yourself, and there's not even the privacy to mourn and to process these emotions. And they obviously didn't give you anybody to talk to, and the people aren't even taking into account that just because it's early in a pregnancy doesn't mean you don't have a connection already to the being that was growing inside of you, to the connection of the soul that was within you, and a connection to the life that you had already dreamed about, right? And the future that you'd already dreamed about. And that, to me, is why I keep on getting all teary-eyed and, upset for you, because I can just imagine the heartbreak that you had to be going through, and then to still manage your physical issues, right? Cleaning yourself, getting yourself put together, and not being, and of course, yes, unfortunately, medical system has very quickly to blame weight for everything. For medical issues, for pain issues, for even with Ehlers-Danlos, oh, if you just lost weight, your knees would be better. Even a friend who had kidney transplant, right? They told her just lose weight first and you'll be okay. And it's like, all of these things that people keep on doing, and they demean the issues of what we're going through and what is being processed. And quite frankly, we've talked about this before. Women are not treated the same in the medical industry. We are not. It's considered emotional when we have a response, right? And it's not taking into account, well, sure, it is emotional because there is an emotional component. You just lost a baby. Of course there's an emotion there. You just lost a future that you were imagining, right? We talked the other day when I had to, and I still grieve, but the life that I thought I was supposed to have, you had to have been going through the same thing of this loss of the life that you expected to have, and then the life that society tells you you're supposed to have, right? And finding your place within that after dealing with, when I grew up, it was always, where do you go to college? Is where you're judged by, right? And then, I'll be perfectly honest, when I didn't go to my first high school reunion, besides challenges that I had in high school, I felt like a failure because I didn't finish my law degree and I wasn't working, right? I didn't have that job, I didn't have kids, and I wasn't working, right? Because I could no longer do it. So I didn't know where my place was in this planet. I mean, obviously, how how much time I spent in the clubhouse and pouring into people into the rooms, because I kind of seem to live on there now. It's my second marriage, but
Your second marriage.
yeah, my husband might say it's my first marriage, but that concept of finding ourselves and defining our space is so important. And that was one of the reasons that I'm so drawn to you, is that you have struggled, you have survived, and you've endured, and you found your place. You have an amazing voice. You empower people to a very high degree. It's beautiful. Your work is gorgeous. The work that you do, and by the way, you are very beautiful. And what you do is amazing, and to know your story just touches my heart, because it shows you can, society can make us feel lesser than, and we can choose to embrace society's definition of us being lesser than, or we can choose to change that narrative. And you did. You found podcasting, and you've changed that narrative for so many people, not just for women who are suffering with the child loss, but I love that you're finding spaces for women for that, right? Because it is really hard when love that you mentioned is finding that space for women without children, right? To give women that chance to not feel like they're, I don't want to say lesser than, but to feel out of place, out of sorts, right? Because sometimes when you're surrounded by people with kids and then you don't have kids, it can be very challenging. It can be like, where do I fit in now? Everybody else has kids and I don't, you know, and they're all talking about the mama talk, right? Or the baby talk, or my baby's doing this, my baby's doing that. This is what they're doing now. And they were really excited. And that's so wonderful. And I get it. But I think it's amazing that you've also created spaces for women that don't have children. Sometimes women don't want children, right? Sometimes it's not in their narrative of what they want. And that's perfectly fine. I mean, in fact, one of my friends that I was in law school with never planned to have children and doesn't want children. You know, she happens to be a pit bull rescuer.
See?
She's an amazing pit bull rescuer. She's an amazing woman. She was actually one of the first people to pop onto my Facebook Live today, and and she mentioned and said hi. And I haven't, she's amazing, and I know, and I remember when we met, and her telling me that she never planned for children and didn't want children. I'm going, huh? Like it didn't resonate at first.
See,
because they were
right, it
trained.
catches you too when people say that. And there's a lot of women I feel like that are stepping into stating and explain. They feel like they need to explain,
Right.
Especially on social media. And obviously, I'm on that side of TikTok, and there is so much of explaining that they have to do,
They shouldn't have to.
and so much hate that they get because it's not that one that I don't want anyone to have children and have their life.
Right.
It's almost just like I want it too. But the other side of that is being okay if I never have a child
Right.
at all. Like I can be whole and I can be loved and I can be me where I'm at instead of saying, oh, this child will give me all of these things.
Right.
I'm missing something. Everyone knows and they see that in my life there's a hole missing.
There's not.
It just makes people uncomfortable when people are different, are living different outside of themselves or what society tells us. And we're seeing that now, right? In so many different areas, especially in this one. And creating the space when I've been around women that they, identify childish, child free in their own way, I was able to step into more of what is my life? What do I want? What are my options? And I felt more, I guess, at peace. Like I do consider myself a mom, but I'm not, I'm a mom of angel babies, and that's how I put it. Like
Absolutely.
I don't have one here. I couldn't give mom advice, and I have friends who have kids, and I'm like, I'd give you advice right now, but by all means, you are the more experienced in this realm of dealing with a 5 and 6 year old. But I just feel like I've become okay to be in the moment where I'm at now and not have kids. And I was also that person that was like, I want a mini. I want a mini me. So I want a child that is mine. So at the time, I wasn't looking at adoption or fostering. And then as even I start looking into them now, stepping into this other side, I realize it is difficult. Like what you were saying is true. And there's also malicious people in these industries that are helping. I'll put in quotation marks if you're listening, they're quote unquote helping, but really just doing stuff for their own pocket. And they will sit there and make you, for instance, IVF. So if you go through IVF, there is a place out there, and I even have an episode where she goes to get IVF and help. She spends tens of thousands of dollars just to get a positive pregnancy test, only to find out that she was really losing it, but maybe she wasn't actually pregnant, that they were just creating a false positive.
Right.
And think about a false positive, true or not, is literally a dagger to the heart.
Absolutely.
And then you're out tens of thousands of dollars to even try again. And a lot of times it takes 3 rounds, and then you have to trust these people, and they're going to clean you out. And what money are you going to have to raise a family? So there's so many, like for me, I would love a surrogate. I would love, love, love a surrogate. That's roughly $125,000. That is not
And you
something
don't
that I
know if
have.
you're going to get that baby afterwards, because sometimes surrogates don't always give the baby back, give the baby up, and then there's the issues that are involved
And then
with
to go
that.
through that, like I know that there was surrogates even during like the pandemic where they couldn't give, they had the 3-month-old for 3 months before they could give it back because of everything being locked down and shut
Oh
down. They
wow.
couldn't give the baby to the parents. So
Oh my
imagine
gosh.
not spending like the first 3 months or any sort of time frame
Right.
with your child. Is like there are different sides to this, and a lot of people want to say, well, at least you guys can go out and do this, or at
Ugh,
least you can do IVF, or at least you can do this. And I always tell people, stop saying at least. It's, although you think you're trying to help, you're
it's not.
not. Just probably
Right.
don't say that. So if you have to lead anything with at least, you've already done a disservice to your friend or family member or confidant, whatever that is.
Right.
Like, please stop using at least, because you're trying to say that it should be better because of a different case scenario.
Yeah.
And that for me doesn't work, especially when I've lost, like each one of those babies meant something to
Hmm.
me, or an idea of, who they would have looked like, what
Right.
personality would they have taken over. And I am lucky now. I think everything happens for a reason, to know that I can find peace and
Hmm.
not blame myself. I can make a decision now and change, and know I can change my mind. Like
Right.
right now, we just want to focus on each other and not put so much pressure on having the baby, because I felt like a lab rat, like having to clean up after myself and understanding the weeks after that took place and
Right.
passing it. Like, again, it's not just a loss. There are countless things, and postpartum lasts, I mean, 6+ months.
Oh my
That's why I call it
goodness.
like my dark age. It's just like I couldn't express to anyone how I was feeling, because I felt like I was wrong for feeling, if that makes sense. Like I
Oh
felt like
no,
anything that I was doing was wrong.
and you shouldn't have felt wrong for it, because that is a real loss. You lost your child,
Hmm.
and unfortunately, a lot of people don't see that. And it doesn't matter whether you are 6 weeks pregnant, 3 months pregnant, or 6 months pregnant. It's a loss. It is a loss of a being that you expected to be a part of your life. I still get choked up when I say it for you, but it is I know that connection and that feeling, but I also know, prior to getting pregnant,
Yeah.
when we had not expected to get pregnant, and that statement all the time, well, you can at least adopt. I was be told a lot. Well, you could at least adopt. You just like threw out what society told us is okay or not okay. And you defined for
Hmm.
yourself what was okay. You found your own path, your own voice, your own strength, and then turned around and empowered other people within having the same challenges as you and having different challenges. And that's what I find so incredible, is your story is, I mean, is horrific. The challenges you went through was horrible, and I am so so sorry that you've had to go through that, and even sorrier that the
Thank
medical
you.
system wasn't there to give you the proper support. That they don't necessarily know the right way to support or interact or help somebody, and provide that mental health component, that whole person component. Let's take care of the whole person, not just the mind, not just the body. Put it all together and really
Hmm.
do that whole person centered approach that I like to refer to as. And often that's not being done. And then the other thing that you brought up that was so vital is being okay with where we're at and not allowing society to tell us
Yes.
where we're supposed to be. We have different stories and different journeys, but we both had that same experience of having to learn to be okay with who we are, be okay with where we're at, even though society has told us we should be doing X, Y, and Z, and we can't do X, Y, and Z, or we can't have X, Y, and Z, and because we can't have that, that would mean we're lesser than. But, we're designed to.
To understand is it's okay to have off days. It's okay to say, you know what? Like, my affirmation was like, I'm a bad bee before I come on and do a recording. You know what I mean? Like, I stood in the mirror and I tell myself, like, But it was, still a rough day to say the least. Like, we are human, and I just don't think that the emotions that we kind of classify everything as is like, oh, you should be happy. What is happy?
Right.
You know, it's all perception and all experience, and we don't allow people to have human experience without judgment. And I
Right.
think that that's where we kind of fuel the flame in society, because that is the reason why me and you wanted to start talking, is to create change. Because often people will have maybe empathy for me, but they will sit there and be the first person to maybe attack someone on the internet that says that they don't want to have kids. So we can't, there's two sides to this. We can't say,
Right.
hey, we want change, and then go attack someone for being completely different. I think that we've seen mental health and
Right.
how we're approaching from the other side
Mm-hmm.
the past couple years through social media, because everything is very public. And whoever is listening, just remember, your responsibility is not to fix someone who is going through something. Like, Deborah, if I came to you and I said, I just want to fix everything that you're going through, like, that would not validate you as a human. Like,
Right.
that is crazy. I can't
I'm not
sit there and say,
broken.
oh, well, you should have done this because that's how I would have done it.
Right. I get
Um,
that, though. I get that a lot. More times than I could possibly count. I get that. Or
mhm.
I'll pray that you're fixed. I'm like, you know what? Just pray that I have strength to do what I want to do. I'm like, that's what you can pray for. If you want to pray for me, pray that I want. Okay, I'll take the less pain prayer, but pray that I have the strength to do what my mission in life is and to be able to help other people. Pray for that. You know, my body is just,
Getting me.
yes, I get that all the time. I can fix you. I'm like, yeah, not quite. I'm not broken. I have
You're
challenges.
right. Thank you.
I'm not broken though.
Like, you're human, and you're where you're at. There's no fixing. We gotta take fixing and like throw it in the garbage. Because, like, when I pray for people, I pray that God surrounds you in love. I pray
Right,
that God blesses you and gives, is with you and your family. Like, when I pray for people, those are the things, not to fix,
right. That's why I do love and
something.
light. Love and light.
That's
I pray
crazy.
that people of love, energy. In fact, today's affirmations were during my meditation and singing bowls was that I am strong, I am loved, and I am surrounded by love, and I am surrounding others with love. And
Hmm.
and that was what I was saying today because that was what I felt, and I was playing a lot with the heart chakra. But that is what I felt, right? That we need to surround ourselves with love. We need to um, envelop. Yeah, I'm having verbal challenges right now, but surround
That's okay.
ourselves, envelop ourselves with love, but also those around us.
Hmm.
Spread that love, share that love, create that energetic feel by what society tells us is a norm versus what it is for ourselves. The same thing for women who choose to not have children. That is their choice. It is our bodies. We have that choice, and it doesn't make us lesser than to not have a child. It doesn't make us lesser than to not be able to carry a child, right? And
Hmm.
you're not lesser than anything at all for being an angel baby mama. It breaks my heart for you, because of that challenge that you had to go through and that loss, and and mourn that loss and not have a ceremony, a closure for that loss, right? Of being that angel baby mama and not having all of the other elements that helps with that. I don't want to say closure, but um,
Hmm.
just the way to say goodbye. And I'm sure you found your own way to do so in your own time. But it's a very hard thing to do, and especially the way you had it in the hospital. That is definitely not a way to start that process to say goodbye to your angel baby in a way where you're cleaning up yourself in the hospital with nobody even there to help you. That is not okay in any way, shape, or form, and
Hmm.
it's horrible that that happened to you, and I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. I'm so incredibly blessed and proud of you, though, for finding your space, finding your voice, coming back out of that dark time, and finding your way again. It sounds like
Hmm.
Marcus has really been helpful too, and that I know back over to you. And just Tell our audience here, have you found this voice and what you've done with your path now?
For me, finding my voice is, again, like you said, it's finding me, who I am now. When you talk about goal setting, I make goals not based off society, but what I want. And I often call that like a spotlight center stage kind of moment, when you're up in front of everyone. And I really had to get clear. Like, clarity for me was what helped me. Like, getting
Right.
clear in my life in areas because, again, I put my identity on everything else. All the wants, to dos, and goals were either things from my past that I thought would be successful, things that I no longer align with. Like, I'm not the girl who is 20 years old. Like, I'm not her. She lived. She's great. There's pieces of her here, but I'm not the same person. So my goals, my vision, getting clear is so crucial throughout our life, our
Right.
lifetime that we're here. And that was one thing. And then two was deciding to talk about these things empowered me in a way that I can't explain, because it's not that I wasn't nervous. It's not that I wasn't scared to do it. It wasn't like those things weren't there, but my I feel like my voice overpowered it all. What I wanted to do overpowered the fear, anxiety, and all those things that come up when you're about to push record or you're about to be on a live and share such a story. Because I've shared this story a few times now, and I definitely get teary-eyed still just because I think about them. And like I said, people kind of grieve what you've gone through, and it's also a different insight to what women go through just as well. So for me, it's to always be a voice. It's always to sit there and like punch society in its face, to be honest, and like shake it to its core, challenge it in any way that I can. Because honestly, the people who showed me love, who showed me support in any sort of way, were not the typical people that you see on the movie screens. Like,
Right.
these perfect people that we pretend exist, Kim Kardashian, all of these things. Like, we act like, and I was one person too, I acted like, oh, they just get this perfect life. Like,
Right.
just
Nobody
hand
has
it to them.
Nobody has perfect.
And that's where I think we get a lot of this judgment with society.
Right.
So it's releasing a lot of the identity that you think you are. It's getting clear into what you want, and it's moving in that path. I have to say, one of the hardest things was for me to show myself compassion.
Right.
Like, actual compassion to go through this, like not blaming myself, not sitting there saying, Crystal, today is going to be a good day. You got to wake up and do, drill sergeant negative Nancy in my head. Like, I was just built in so many different ways from my surroundings when I was even younger on how to deal with things that led to me really needing to heal. And
Right.
that's what it comes to. It's like, it is not your responsibility to heal me. Like, it is my responsibility. That's why when I talk about that, I expected Marcus to come and fix me, heal me, pick up my pieces. That's not realistic, because at the end of the
Right.
day, me right here, I'm the one that had to pick up every single piece and put it back together and figure it out, because it wasn't the same picture.
Right.
It's different. It's broken. And there's some pieces that are missing. You heal. You constantly are checking in. Like, I have great self-awareness now, but I just have to say, it takes time. And I think we want that quick result, because Lord
Right.
knows during that time I did. We want the quick result. My only thing I say to people is show yourself compassion and give yourself time. Just be consistent with you. Like, show up more for you than you show up for everyone else. And that's why I
Right.
tell people, get crystal clear in your purpose, and then you will find the power in your own story. And that is why it is my message, because that's what I had to do to save me, like, to find me. That's what I had to do. I'm no longer who I was. I'm Crystal now, and I'm gonna be Crystal in 10 years, who is different and evolved and, has changed her mind on things. And
Right.
has stepped into different areas. And I think that we just have to allow people to be who they are. And I'm not everyone's, cup of tea, and I am completely okay with that. But I like shaking up the system. I'm a rooter for the underdog. I always have been. And I just want to make way to where we can talk and not be judged or fixed, because we don't need to be fixed nor need to take the responsibility to fixing other people.
Right.
Right? Because that's a trauma response alone. And I just want people to start coming together, having open dialogue, and start living a life that's out of these societal views that were created before we were even in existence. Like, we've seen so many things that need to be rocked until it is changed. And I think we are all here to do so. Every single generation is here to do that. It's to shake the system and to make it better. And I think we are not trying to make things better, we're allowing the bad things to happen. And we're shutting down people's voices. It is absolutely amazing to see how many women are stepping into podcasting, even yourself, finding your voice, sharing your message, because it's not a competition. It never was. It never needed to be.
And I love that you highlight that, right? That you embrace that, you empower women. I think it's one of the reasons why I'm so drawn to you is that you have definitely stepped into your power. You've stepped into your superpower and your voice of not just sharing your story, but empowering those of others to share their stories. And you're doing an absolutely phenomenal job with it. And I am just in awe of what you do and so proud of you. And by the way, can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Oh my goodness, yes. Head over to @the_Crystal_Fox, 2 E's, okay, on Instagram, because there's too many of us. Or just simply go to crystalballclarityofitall.com. And that has everything you need. And I'm updating constantly. And you can actually listen to the episode me and Deborah did not too long ago. So please go check that out.
I will have those links as well up there. But I really very much thank you for this interview today. I know we talked a lot about emotional things, very very personal things, and I really wanted to thank you for sharing that with our listeners, because I really do think this story is very important to learn this journey and to hear it and to know it's okay to not be okay. It is okay to not be able to have children. It is okay to find your place in this world with or without children. And it's okay to mourn that loss, right? And to one of the things I heard from you too is that to learn to not blame yourself for these challenges, right? Because it's not your fault these things happened. Even though somebody might try to say, oh, it's your weight, or oh, you did this, or oh, you did that, or you shouldn't have done this, or you shouldn't have done that, and then try to blame you for it, right? It's okay to not be okay, and then it's okay to redefine who you are at that moment in time, and it's okay for that to change, right? It doesn't have to be a static thing. And we as women are not identified by how many children we have. We're not identified by whether we are married or not, or whether we're in a relationship, or whether we have a specific type of job. We are identified by who we are as a human being, and how do we contribute to the human experience, to the communities in our societies, not by a title, not by a degree, not by a job or a college that we went to. We are defined by the carbon footprint that we leave. I like to say the human footprint, humankind footprint that we leave behind. That's what we're defined by, and you leave an amazing, amazing footprint behind you. And I just have to say, I am always in awe and honored to be in your presence. You have done so much, and I'm so inspired by the work that you do that I want to just really, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you so much for pouring out so much today with us, and I really appreciate that. Is there anything you wanted to add before we ended the recording for today?
Yes, I want to say thank you for having me on and being such a supporter in everything that you're doing. Thank you for doing this podcast. Okay. And anyone who's listening, please go leave a 5-star review, like, subscribe, all those things, and give us some feedback. Tell us, what are things that you've had to deal with too that we've talked about,
I love that. It's a
So-
call to action, right?